going to call this meeting to order. This is the House Appropriations the General Appropriations Subcommittee of the House Appropriations Committee. And we called this meeting today for the purpose of Natural Resources Department to come back and give us some information on the fishing, Go Fish initiative. Members of the subcommittee last week had asked for some more information. It's my understanding that the Commissioner has some information he wants to bring to us today. And so it's really for that purpose only, and to give the Commissioner a chance to make a presentation with any additional information he has to bring to us, and also to give the members of the subcommittee an opportunity to ask questions and try to get information for their decision-making process in this process of creating the 07 amended budget. And I would just ask, Commissioner, you can come up now. I would just ask you to, any specifics that you can give us in your presentation that would help us better understand this, we would appreciate it. And with that, thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be back and to further explain this initiative, which we think is a tremendous project for the state of Georgia. At our last meeting, you asked me for several things, and the staff has worked extremely hard, both on technical parts of this, along with the Office of Planning and Budget, to put together, I think, a meaningful budget that you can look at, as well as a brochure that explains some of the goals of the project. And I will go over those. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I want to allow you as much time as you need to make sure you are perfectly comfortable with this initiative. I'll remind you that it had three major components. First was to improve access to Georgia waters. Second was to improve the quality of fishing in Georgia waters. And third was to increase fishing participation by promoting Georgia's natural resources. And I'm prepared to talk about the budget on each one of those, but I do want to point out a couple of things that are on the Go Fish brochure that each of you should have at your table. And it addresses one of the questions that we had last week. This is actually a $30 million initiative. The governor has been most generous in giving us a $19 million start on this project. I'm satisfied through a variety of different mechanisms, private donations, some federal dollars that we possibly can bring to this program, and other activities that we can generate the other $10 to $11 million to make this project successful. So that's why we were very, very concerned about any reduction to the $19 million. It'll make the fundraising and other funding sources much more difficult to achieve if we don't have the full $19 million. And I speak to $19 million because I'm referring to $6 million that are in the 08 part of the budget. But specifically, we're here today to address the $13 million that's in supplemental. If you look at the sheet that I gave you on Go Fish and the Go Fish Georgia initiative, you'll see a spreadsheet that refers to both FY07 and FY08, and I'll restrict my at least initial comments to the 07 part of that. Under Goal 1, we have a Go Bass Trail, and that's to improve access to Georgia waters. As you'll recall, I gave you, or mentioned last week, and subsequently gave you a map, which is also on the back of the brochure. There's 15 sites that we've identified around the state of Georgia that we feel meet at least the conditions for a mega ramp, in terms of there is a physical body of water there that would suit a mega ramp, and the conditions and ownership patterns are conducive to us being able to place a mega ramp in those facilities. We also, through our staff, believe we know some of the communities that would be potentially ready to engage with us on those mega ramps, and we've indicated those by the darker color. I think on mine it's sort of a goldish or color. Those, and they range from down near the Savannah area up toward the Hartwell area. That's our staff's best, and I don't want to call it a guess, because much of our fisheries staff are engaged professionally with these guys. They understand the tournament business. They understand what is needed to support a tournament in Georgia, and just given the dynamics of the communities, we feel like those communities are positioned to proceed if this money is available. Now, with that said, we intend this to be some kind of a matching program, and we are diligently working on how that match may work and can have something, I think, to you by the end of this session. But right now, we're still striving to work on the match. And quite honestly, the match may be different between a Tier 1 county and a Tier 2 county, depending which of these facilities or communities may come to us. I can tell you, since this has been rolled out over the last few days, I've had several communities call me telling me they were already working on a match component, not even knowing exactly what the match may be. But the folks down in Crisp County around Lake Blackshear are very interested in this. We've had calls from West Point and the communities around West Point Lake, as well as other large bodies of waters and a couple of rivers. So there is tremendous community interest in this, and they are beginning, if you will, to get their ducks in a row to compete for these dollars. But I don't have the actual metrics of whether it'll be a 50% match or whatever the case may be. I sort of see this as being competitive, and given a community coming forward, and we have limited funds, that we'll be choosing the ones that bring the most match and have the potential for the biggest bang for the buck as we spend down the money that's allotted. Are there any questions about the boat ramp before I move to Goal 2 and Goal 3?
We do have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who's at 28? Who has the light on?
I'm 26.
Who has the question? Let's put it that way. Okay, I've got your light. Okay. Go right ahead.
Mr. Commissioner, on the boat ramp part, and I notice we're looking at mostly larger cities, but rural Georgia also has some interest. And the state owns land in a lot of our rural counties. As a matter of fact, in one of my counties, they own a 500-acre tract with a boat ramp to add some wildlife, been set aside for wildlife there. What are we going to do about a place like that?
I didn't mean to imply that this was not going to be, rural areas without a large city could apply for this. Not at all. I will tell you, though, to attract a ramp takes more than just to attract a tournament takes more than just a mega ramp. You've got to have the infrastructure available for those guys in terms of restaurants and lodging and some other things to make it attractive for a community or a group of communities to go out and attract one of these tournaments. But I by no means intended to imply that you had to be a municipality to attract one of these. In fact, I see counties and cities working hand in hand to make these tournaments. And it may be a group of counties and communities working hand in hand to make this happen.
But what can a small community do, though, to get involved? Because right now you mentioned some other areas like Lake Lights and these places who are interested. Certainly they have large bodies of water. I'm talking about like on the Flint River where you have communities there with lodge and with all these kinds of things. But how can they get involved?
They will contact the Wildlife Resources Division, which will have developed, and I have already tasked the director of the Wildlife Resources Division to start assimilating some of the information these communities will need. For instance, a very, very large lake may be able to host a national tournament. That doesn't mean that a smaller community on a smaller body of water cannot host a large tournament, but they may not have the physical capacity to go after an ESPN national tournament with hundreds and hundreds of boats. The body of water, for instance, the Flint River, could not possibly have several hundred bass boats on it at one time, nor could some of the smaller lakes in the 200 to 300 size range that we have around the state. But certainly those large reservoirs, they're going to ask the question, what do I need? And for a national tournament, it'll be X number of hotel rooms, X number of places to eat. And for a smaller regional or a state tournament, that'll be scaled back. And we'll be able to work with those communities, given their physical constraints, if they have any, to position themselves for the size of mega ramp and the type of obligations they'd have to do to move forward to attract that type of tournament to their locale. Now, without a specific, I couldn't tell you, in terms of whether, a Lake Blackshear or a body of water on a state park may qualify for which size. But that's the way we're going with this.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Representative James? Okay, Representative Hill.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thought I was the last one on there. But could you tell us, please, Commissioner, a little bit more about these mega ramps, about how big they are, and about approximately what the cost, the ones that would be used for the national tournament. I realize there's many sizes of ramps, but for probably the handful that would be the large ramps, about what size are they?
Generally in cost, we've used the figure that cost about $1 million, but there's a lot of variation there depending on where it is. It may be a little more if it's in a coastal area with fluctuation of tides, a little less in a place that's just conducive to putting in that type of structure. But basically a mega ramp is targeted toward the size of tournaments you want. And to host and attract these tournaments, you've got to be able to put a certain number of boats in the water in a specified period of time, whether it's 200 boats or 300 boats. Certainly the lake itself or the water body lends itself to what the capacity is. And we'll be working with those individual communities, telling them what we think they can do, whether it needs to be an 8-lane mega ramp or a 10-lane mega ramp. But coincidental to that, you've also have to have the parking for that many boats and trailers, and lots of little things that make it attractive for those guys and gals to come here. For instance, after they come in from a day of fishing, they've got to recharge their trolling motors. And communities that's been successful with that have outdoor receptacles close to the hotel rooms where they can plug in those trolling motors and be ready to go for these tournaments. May be a 3-day tournament, and they got to be ready with their equipment each day.
Okay, so with large ramps like that, I guess after all the time and money and energy and efforts that we spent the last couple of years putting buffers in to our streams and lakes to keep them pure from all the pollutants that might be on boats, cars, trucks, and everything else in this, how are these ramps constructed to prevent? I can see all the drippings and everything on these big ramps, and then we come a rain and we're just washing all those pollutants directly into the body of water. Is there any sort of system to catch all of that from the parking lots and everything that we're creating? Because we're right next to a huge body of water.
And that's a great question. Certainly on the parking lots and that type of thing, there are engineering things that you can do. With respect to the ramp itself, there's very, very little, and in fact, in some of the rules and regulations that we pass in the Department of Natural Resources, that's listed as one of the exceptions, because there's just almost nothing you can do to prevent or treat runoff from the hard ramp itself. But there's certainly either passive or active engineering things that you can do in the parking lots and the areas surrounding the immediate ramp itself.
Okay, and then I guess I'll come back to my original question on this. And again, I think everybody on this committee is greatly appreciative of this effort and is looking forward to this project. But I still have a hard time seeing how the sites have not yet been totally identified. And like you said, we are looking at a lot of land for parking and everything. While the state may own a lot of land, finding the right piece of land that's level enough to construct it, as to how, even combined with the match, that we can spend $10 million in the 4.5 months after this budget could be approved before the end of the fiscal year. And I just wonder if perhaps those monies wouldn't be better moved to the 08 budget, that $5 million plus the $5 million match, when we don't have a hard definition of even where they are, looking at the costs, etc. I think it would be a little perhaps premature to like contracts on that when we're still in the studying and we're looking for matching communities. Probably have to put things out to bid if we have two competing groups within a community to keep it legal and clean. I just find it's hard pressed to do that in 4 months or 5 months.
I'm even more confident in the week since this last meeting with the number of phone calls that I got. And again, we had them from Lake Blue Ridge, West Point Reservoir, Reed Bingham State Park, or that lake down there, Blackshear State Park, Savannah River. I'm even more confident that these communities are ready to come to the table. I'm totally satisfied that we'll have this money encumbered, and I've in fact tasked the Director of Wildlife Resources. I want one of these online, just absolutely as soon as possible, so we can go out and use that as the prototype, not only to get a fishing tournament in a new location, but also show the communities this can be done quickly, and the kind of match that we've done. But we will have, by the end of March, all of the criteria in terms of the match, whether it's a Tier 1 county, a Tier 2 county, and the kind of ramps. We already know the bodies of water, what kind of a tournament they'll support. Our folks know that a Lake Lanier or a Lake Clark Hill or Lake Russell, what size tournament they can support, as opposed to a slightly smaller lake like a Lake Blackshear, what size it could support.
Okay, I guess I'm just basing it off my experience. It took over 2 years to get permission to repair a riverbank that was trying to destroy the American Legion post in our area where it was washing away. It took over 2 years to get permission to put a little riprap along there on private land that was encroaching the river, just to repair something to keep it from destroying. I'm just so amazed that we can do this so fast for fishing when we can't do that to protect an American Legion post. So I'm having a hard time correlating why some things take so long, and now just because we have a lot of publicity, other things move so fast. And I guess I'm kind of hurt that it took that long to repair something that our veterans have, that is, the EPD took over 2 years to give me a permit at our insistence, and yet all of this is going through in a matter of months. And that's kind of my questioning on here, is I'm having a hard time correlating some of this.
And I do not mean to mislead you. There will be pieces of property, perhaps Corps of Engineers property. We can move fairly expeditiously if it's already a boat ramp and we want to expand that use agreement. But if it's a brand new site, we will have some sites that will take 1 to 2 years to get to complete. And we also, there's other pieces of property around that may have those challenges, but we are satisfied that we can move expeditiously on to spend this $5 million.
Good. Well, we'll do everything we can to support this project. It looks like a great one for the city.
Thank you very much, sir.
We have a number, I was just saying this, we have a number of chairmen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your presentation. And I have another meeting I have to be at 10 o'clock, so I apologize for leaving after I asked my question. But there has been some discussion as to why this state agency would be receiving this type of revenue when we've got other state agencies who have more needs. And my answer to them has been that this is an agency that can generate revenue for the state, and it is also an agency that can promote the state. So I'm supportive of your initiative, but I think as this goes through the General Assembly process, in addition to these types of questions, the other question that will have to be answered is why should this be elevated when we're cutting funds in other areas? So I think that's a key point to keep addressing.
Thank you, and all due respect, she is my chairman in Natural Resources, and I will refer to her as chairman.
And the chair is leaving, so sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Representative Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here this morning. Just a couple of points. Just from what Representative Hill stated, I think I'd have to agree with him on the permitting process, and I think the Director of EPD, Dr. Carol Couch, would agree as well that there has been a tremendous backlog in the last few years. As a matter of fact, when the current administration became the current administration, there is a tremendous backlog in the permitting process. My understanding is that processing time frame has been improved, drastically improved. Nevertheless, is still not what it needs to be, but as compared to where it was, I think it's moved pretty far. That being said, I'm sure there's probably an increased staffing need in that permitting process over at EPD. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir, and as you recall, the governor was very gracious with some of the erosion and sedimentation to increase, I think it was eight positions that will come online to meet that increased need this coming year. But you're exactly right. We have a tremendous growth in this state, 150,000 new residents, and those guys are needing, and ladies are needing places to live and the work, places to work that are coming along with that.
So those new permitting folks will come on on July 1 for the OA budget?
We'll start the hiring process in July, pending.
And they'll go effective on July 1?
Yes.
Okay, great. As far as as far as the what I call the 07 versus the 08 issue, and again, Chairman Hill raises an excellent question. My sense, though, and my sense on this is from a business perspective, each individual one of these sites that you've outlined in your brochure has different priorities. They have different local governments, different requirements, different abilities to go ahead and raise any sort of matching funds, whether it come from private foundations or local government monies or whatever it may be. It would strike me just from a business perspective in terms of the development of each and every one of these sites on a going forward basis, it would strike me, correct me if I'm wrong, it would strike me that it would be important to be able to sit down at the table with the West Point Lake Authority, let's just call it that. I don't know what it's called. We'll call it the West Point Lake Authority. And be able to sit down, look them in the eye and say, we have X amount of millions of dollars that are committed at this point. We're going forward. We're going forward somewhere. What do you bring to the table to allow us collectively to go forward there at your lake as opposed to another? I think it's a tremendous leverage point. Again, we're not leveraging localities, but we have to demonstrate to localities that we're serious. And I think in our world, you're serious if you've got dollars at the table and you're ready to deal. And that it works both ways, obviously. My sense is that that would be the proper approach, so that between now and July 1, you can have those conversations. From what you've just said, unless I'm wrong, localities have already approached the state.
Exactly.
So if that's the case, I think we've got every responsibility personally to make sure that we can go ahead and consummate those deals in the most expeditious manner possible, because the sooner we can get those done, we can move on to the next one. And once we've got an example or two or three of how these deals can work from an economic development standpoint, I think the localities are going to be lining up outside the door. I really do. And we'll be able to go ahead and pinpoint state taxpayer money on the best opportunities depending on location and all the other local dynamics that you're going to know better than we do. I think it's a timing thing. I think you've got money in hand. You can cut the best deal you can for the citizens of that area. That's where I'm at. If you tell me if I'm wrong.
I could not agree with you more. You know, I think the communities are going to be very competitive in their approach to this, and we're going to try to be creative with those communities. Back down to the question we had from Mr. Representative James, you know, we'll look at in-kind. And again, one of the other important parts is we don't want to just build a ramp because we got the money and they've got the money. We want a commitment from those communities to aggressively market for those tournaments, because a mega ramp sitting there without the tournaments is not going to generate income. It's going to generate goodwill with local fishermen, and that's a great thing. But this is an economic development opportunity for rural Georgia and other parts of the states as well. But I really believe rural Georgia can step up, and we'll try to be creative with those communities that have less ability to pass a local option sales tax or whatever, and perhaps go with in-kind. They've got bulldozers and graders and capabilities to assist our folks that have done such a great job with the boat ramps around this state already. But we want to be creative and get those ramps we know are going to be successful and get them online quickly. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you, Representative Golick. I wanted to say that you did your professions of attorney, insurance man, and governor's floor leader proud. Did very well.
Am I still on, Mr. Chairman? I don't know exactly. I've yet to actually understand the insurance aspects of this initiative, but I'm sure the chair will enlighten me at the proper time.
Let's see. Representative Mills.
Thank you. I apologize for leaving to go to rules right quick, but I just wanted to reemphasize we stand ready at Hall County surrounding Lake Lanier, and we think we're a site that would be suitable for, already have been, for national tournaments. Our people know how to do it, and I think it's important for us to not lose sight. It's easy to lose sight of what's going to happen in this project when you say go fish. This is about much more than going fishing. This is about economic development. It's about tourism being brought in. And at the same time, the component of this that I really do appreciate, it's about bringing families together in an event that is wholesome, that is good for everybody, that we can be proud of as a state. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know how that fits into my banking committee, but I'm sure I just wanted to, before I leave, say that we stand ready in the surrounding communities in Hall County and Lake Lanier. We love this project.
Thank you for the comment. And I did not mention Lake Lanier because I didn't want to put you on the spot. I knew they were ready, willing, and able, and we're ready to engage with Lake Lanier.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams.
Follow up a little bit on Representative Golick's comments about the coming to the table with money. I know, and it could affect the amount of money that we allocate to Department of Natural Resources for this thing. We've got 13 million requests right here looking at us, and I know you've identified the sites and that sort of thing, and that money could go to a lot of things to get this thing started. How are we going to handle the matching fund? Now, we're talking about local government. What about the private enterprise? Are we going to, what concessions would we make? We have to name a park after Home Depot, Marina, or whatever. How is the private mix going to work in with the government mix and the state funds? How is that going to be handled? What are we going to require? X amount of dollars from a private to say, okay, we'll let you get in, but you're going to have to come up with so much money, or are we going to listen to what that? How's that going to work? The mechanics of it.
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I've got a specific answer to you. We have not engaged a Home Depot or a Walmart, although I can tell you Walmart is the sponsor of one of the largest fishing circuits in the country, and I think they certainly can be a player in this. We haven't thought down the road to the point of naming things. I mean, most of these sites, if they're on a state park or on a Corps of Engineers lake, may have some limitations, on what you could do. But I think most of these industries, it's bottom line. They see that this is going to be a tremendous boon to fishing, and also the publicity that they will achieve from being a partner in this operation. And then there's also going to be those local folks in a particular community. There's a lot of fishing-oriented industry in this state. Some of the lure manufacturers, clothing manufacturers, and other in this state, and I think they will see the benefit of being a player in this. And then certainly Bass Pro, which is one of the largest retailers of outdoor sporting goods in the country, they have 3 locations in Georgia, one in Atlanta, one in Savannah, and just opened one in the Macon area. So, I think all of these folks are people that will engage with it sometime, and then we'll count on the local convention and visitors bureaus and the chambers of commerce throughout the state to find those local folks of interest. Again, I said this last week, you don't export ecotourism dollars. They're here to stay, and I think these counties are going to really recognize this as something that's going to be stable and permanent source of jobs in their communities.
It may or may not, but it could possibly lessen the amount of money you need from state funds if we get an outpouring of private and public support matching funds. Could lessen your request to the state then for these dollars. I mean, it could or could not, but it could affect it that way.
I have got an aggressive. I will have to aggressively go after the dollars to match this $19 million. I'm prepared to do that. I certainly would challenge you with some of the carpet industries in Northwest Georgia to assist me with that.
Give us. We don't have a mega ramp up in Dalton.
We'll find a way to We'll find a way to engage you up at Carter's Lake.
Thank you.
That's all the questions I see on that. You were going to go into the other 2 segments. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. If there's a desire, I know most of the questions were about the mega
I know a lot of
ramps.
questions were general, but if you wish to go
Sure.
ahead.
I'll briefly go through the Education and Visitor Center. That's part of the increased fishing participation by promoting the Georgia resources. I guess where we're at with that is we did the research. We know that, and then some of the information is in here if you look at it, but there are what we call losing and gaining states in the fishing industry. We recognized very early on that there is a tremendous number of states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois. They are losing states, as is Georgia for that matter. One of the principal receiving states in the country is Florida. Well, if you look at the maps of those losing states and Florida as a receiving state, we know those guys are coming through Georgia to go to Florida by any number of our interstate corridors. We want to be able to capture those folks. and get them to spend those dollars here and tell them what kind of great fishing destinations we have. So I think a visitor center, and we've talked a lot about this, again, with the Director of Wildlife Resources, about ways we can get those folks in one spot, get them distributed to not only our big reservoirs, but certainly our public fishing areas. We've got a tremendous, about 10 public fishing areas that provide tremendous public fishing opportunity on lakes that are about 100 acres in size, but they're catching huge bass out of these lakes. And all of them have a kids fishing lake associated with them. So as families travel south, if we can, if you will, shortstop them before they get to Texas, Florida, and show them what kind of great fishing opportunities we have here, they may never make it to Florida, or next year they may choose to come to Georgia as opposed to driving that extra day's travel into Florida. So we think this visitor center is very important to there. We're thinking about things where we'll have interactive CDs that they can punch up the Okefenokee, and our fisheries biologist down in the Okefenokee actually shows them techniques that they can use in Georgia, in the Okefenokee, as a successful fishing trip. You know, what they need to buy, and we may work with Walmart or Bass Pro and say, this is what you need to catch a fish in the Okefenokee, and that way we can couple with industry here in Georgia, and they can go buy just exactly those things for a successful trip there or a successful trip trout fishing up in northeast Georgia. We are blessed in Wildlife Resources Division, and actually throughout DNR, with several hundred missionaries. They absolutely are impassioned about what they do, and they're ready to go out in front of the public and tell them how to have a good time here.
Okay.
If there's no other questions about that, I'll mention the final part under Goal 3 is the hatchery. $1.5 million of this would be used for design and preliminary site development of a hatchery that goes to improving the quality of fishing in our trout waters. Just briefly, I'll mention that several states, Texas, Florida, and California, three principal ones, are aggressively trying to steal the world record largemouth bass from Georgia, and they're doing a lot of things. But one of the things that has proved very successful, particularly out west, is stocking a larger size forage fish, not in these large bodies of water necessarily, but in bodies of water that is reflective of our state parks, public fishing areas, and other public bodies, public waters, like some of our water reservoirs. And they've seen the bass size, and because of that, the fishing pressure go up significantly where they put a large forage fish in. We do not have the capability of doing that in Georgia. Our hatcheries are totally maxed out with production that they're already doing. And this will be an integral point because we want to get them here. We know we can get them here, but we want them to have a successful trip when they come. So we want them to catch a big bass, and the hatchery is very, very important to that. But we also think the hatchery will fit into an educational component of the visitor center. We feel like they would probably be co-located. And this will generate, I think, a lot of, probably close to self-sustaining funds for the operation of it. We know in conversations with other states that's the case anyway. So briefly, that's how the balance of that money would be spent.
Thank you. Representative Williams has.
The Cohutta hatchery, is it still University of Georgia's property, or did DNR take it back?
No, we do not operate that one.
Okay. A lot of people expressed the interest that you take it over and use it for what it was intended to back before the research started up there. Is there any possibility of...
You know, I've heard that over the years when I was with Wildlife Resources Division. I think there's some limitations on it as a production facility for cold water fisheries due to some of the flows of water that occur up there. I think they are fully engaged and have an MOU with the Chattanooga Aquarium and are doing some good things with sturgeon and other fish up there. But I haven't seen any proposals or requests recently for us to take that over.
I know some have got, apparently they're furnishing some trout to people to go up there and get. I don't know whether that's a sideline of what they're doing up there or what. But
they don't supply any trout for public waters. They could possibly do that for private waters. Yes, sir.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, I believe in the last couple of years there were a couple of programs, and I can't find them in the 08, that had been cut from your budget that might be important to this fishing, and that was in the the weed and removal and some of the other algae blooms, et cetera, because I understand that's a tremendous problem in many of these bodies of waters. How is that program going? Is that a program that needs to be funded additionally along with this to help protect some of those bodies of water? Or am I wrong? Was not some of that cut a couple of years ago?
Yes, sir. There was actually, that's two questions, and I'll try to address both. We did cut some of our technical assistance to private land, pond owners, where we would go out and analyze their water and determine, do a seine to determine what kind of fish were in there and what populations they were. We got into that business years and years ago when there was nobody else to do that except a handful of fisheries biologists that happened to work for the various states or federal government. Because of the success of our land-grant colleges around the United States, and certainly here in the University of Georgia, there's a number of people that are going into the private consulting business. We've had some of our retired employees actually go into that business. So, we were competing with a very, very viable and dynamic industry, and at the time, it was not a matter of, there was not an ability for a citizen to find someone in the phone book, or we can provide lists of that, to do that type of work. And given the budget crunches that we had back in a few years ago, we just felt like it was an area where the public could get that service at a reasonable cost without us being engaged in it. Now, in terms of weed control, we have had some modest funds to do that, coupled with some partnerships, I think, at Lake Blackshear, also with some federal dollars down at Seminole. But the species of aquatic vegetation that are choking some of those waterways are basically, they're here to stay. You could spend any amount of money you wanted to trying to eradicate those programs or those particular species. And there are slugs of money that come in from time to time from the federal government on those large bodies of water. Again, Seminole and is the one that comes immediately to mind. And it's a balancing act between actually that vegetation provides good duck habitat. It's not good for skiing, and when it chokes out the whole lake, it's not good for fishing. But there's sort of a dynamic there where we try to balance the interests in all of those activities on particular bodies of water.
Yeah, and then particularly on Seminole and Blackshear, I know that was a concern, and if we're looking at fishing those areas, I want to make sure that you have the funds, if needed, to also keep them fishing, 5-10 years from now, rather than have them choked out by the weeds. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
That's all the questions I see right now. I did want to I want to thank you for coming and providing information, answering questions today. As from what I can tell, the members of the subcommittee, the ones I've heard from, all agree that this is a good project. I mean, it's a good economic development. Whether somebody likes to fish or not, it would be a good economic development initiative for the state. I am curious. The governor's expressed over the last few years, and it's been, I think most of us on the subcommittee have expressed over a number of years, the desire in an amended budget that the changes only be used, other than money going into reserve fund if it's depleted, which ours has been, only be used for emergency type of situations, and this isn't an emergency. I'm just curious, can you tell us, and I think we might not be looking at this perhaps, we'll be looking at it carefully, don't get me wrong, but I think we're looking at it a little bit differently because it is in the amended budget, and because of our philosophy and things that we have criticized in the past. We've criticized things in the amended budget. We've criticized issues where, it would be questionable whether taxpayer money should go to it or whether it should be private money. How did this, can you tell us how this ended up being this much money with this initiative has ended up in the amended budget proposal of the governor?
I honestly don't know that I'm the person to answer that question.
Okay.
I can't speak.
I understand that. That's fine. You're the commissioner, and
I'm very
you have a
supportive.
job to do, and you would be glad to get the money in there to do what you think needs to be done. I'm looking at this, the money for the hatchery, and $1.5 million, if I'm reading this correctly, in the amended 07 budget, then a much larger number to go into the 08.
Yes.
That kind of sticks out to me as something where, don't you think that's something that could be addressed when you have this several millions of dollars going into the 08 budget? That's something could be addressed at that time and not put that $1.5 million in the 07 amended budget?
Well, we need to, I want to be ready to go. I see, as I said, the hatchery being co-located with the visitor center, and I think it would be very wise for us to have that design and everything done at the same time. It'll save the state money in the long run. It'll also expedite getting the thing up and running and providing those fish and visitor opportunities as well. So that's the way we carve that up, and I think that's a very, very prudent way to move forward.
Okay. It's possible that the subcommittee, it's possible, I don't know what the subcommittee will decide to do, it's possible that the subcommittee would decide to, again, because it says in the amended budget there is a limited amount of time to spend it, it's possible that they would want to reduce some of these funds, maybe significantly, I don't know. Before we do that, and while you're here, can you make any recommendations to us how much you think we could cut and still do what you need to do?
I quite honestly don't think that I could take a cut and still do what we need to do. As I said, I've got a very ambitious task in front of me in terms of raising money, a commitment from the state in terms, and I'm speaking in terms of a $30 million project, and the state putting almost 2/3 of that forward is going to be a great tool for me to use as I go to industry, municipalities, counties, or groups of counties, and say, the state is bringing this to the table. I'm challenged to raise the other third. As I move it back, that sale will be harder and more difficult for me to achieve those numbers.
I understand. I couldn't expect any different answer. It's just that if we do that, if the subcommittee does decide to move that way, it would be better if we had a number from you, that we could look at. But I understand your position, and I understand why you wouldn't want to make any recommendation as to that. Well, we appreciate, I don't see any other questions. We appreciate so much. And I can tell you, just as a personal note, I've been in Georgia over half my life. I came here after college. I came from an economically depressed state where I wish that more money had been put in. I wish more money would have been able to be put in economic development projects, because it is good for the state. It's good for, in the long run, it's good for the taxpayers if you can bring industry in. And I think we all realize that. There are so many. I know that, when you think about economic development, our airports, these little airports around the state, there's so many things we could put money into that would end up helping the state. So we have to look at each one of them. And as you know, we have to look at things not just within the agencies we look at in the subcommittee, but we also we're part of the whole appropriations process. So as you know, there are tremendous needs, that have been identified and talked about, and that we have to try to do our share to help with those needs too, Medicaid and all those education, all those things have been identified. But we appreciate you coming. We appreciate the information. And if there aren't, I don't see any other lights on, so we thank you for coming today.
Thank you, sir. And as you can tell, I'm very excited about this, and I promise you we're going to make it successful. I'm going to put all my energy into this.
Thank you.